When the world goes quiet, some voices still remain. Not every soul finds peace when the clock strikes 12. There are stories hidden in the shadows, whispers drifting between the living and the forgotten. Some stories linger, some souls don't leave. Welcome to Stillness After Midnight, where every silence tells a story. If you're drawn to the mysteries that stir after dark, the voices that echo when the world sleeps, subscribe now and join us as we listen to the souls who still have something to say, because in the stillness, the truth finally speaks. I am not sure how to begin this story without admitting one thing first. I never believed in curses, not until the mountain took her. Claire was not supposed to disappear. She was the kind of woman who mapped every step of her life as carefully as she mapped her travels, folding itineraries into neat squares, circling shrines on paper maps as if ink could protect her from the unpredictable. Yet one evening in late autumn, while the air in Japan was cooling with the scent of cedar and burning leaves, I received a call that shattered the structure of our world. Her friend's voice was trembling across the ocean. She never came back from the trail. We searched until nightfall, but there was nothing. The forest swallowed her. I booked the first flight I could find to Tokyo. The cabin air was heavy with recycled oxygen, but I could not breathe. I stared at the blinking light above my seat, counting the seconds, clenching my fists as if the act itself could drag the plane faster across the Pacific. My mind replayed the last time we spoke. She had sent me a photo from Nagano, a smile beneath her scarf, cheeks flushed with cold. Behind her, the slopes dipped into mist. She had captioned it with a single line, "Wish you were here to see how beautiful it is." I typed back something hurried, a promise to visit later when work was less demanding. I never imagined those words might be the last thread tying us together. The closer we drew to Japan, the more my thoughts grew feverish. I tried to picture the mountain she vanished into. I had read about it before. The Japanese Alps, ridges that sliced the sky like the spine of a dragon. Villages clung at the base like offerings, temples hidden in the folds of the peaks. Travel guides spoke of beauty. Folklore whispered of something else. Oni, demons of the mountains. Spirits with horns and red eyes known to hunt travelers who strayed from the path. It seemed ridiculous at the time, a myth embroidered into tourist folklore. But myths, I would learn, have teeth. I landed in Tokyo under a dim sun. The airport's brightness felt unreal. Voices over loudspeakers, polite bows of attendants. Life moved forward here as if nothing had been disturbed, while mine had collapsed into silence. From there I boarded a train north. The windows framed fields of persimmons drying on racks, shrines tucked between rivers. Autumn wrapped the landscape in ochre and crimson, yet I could not marvel. Every station, every tunnel, brought me closer to the void she had stepped into. I remember the weight of the language barrier pressing down. I knew a handful of Japanese words, no more than what one might pick up from travel magazines. Missing, mountain, name. Still, faces softened when I showed her photograph. Station workers bowed apologetically, guiding me toward local police. I was told the same thing, again and again, in clipped English. Search still going. No news yet. It was evening when I reached the small town at the mountain's foot. Lanterns swayed in the wind outside wooden houses. A thin mist slid down from the peaks like a veil. My suitcase wheels rattled against cobbled stones as I searched for the inn where her friends had stayed. The innkeeper was a hunched man with a lantern in his hand. His eyes widened slightly when he saw Claire's picture. He did not ask many questions, just nodded, slow, as if confirming something he had already feared. Then he led me to a small tatami room, lit by a single oil lamp. That night I could not sleep. Have you ever tried to rest while knowing someone you love might be calling out for you in the dark? Every sound clawed at me. Wooden beams creaked like footsteps. Outside Geta clogs clicked faintly on stone, though no one should have been walking at that hour. I slid the shoji door open. Only the wind greeted me, sweeping the paper lanterns strung above the inn's eaves. They swayed, and in their sway I thought I saw her shadow, slender, familiar, moving toward the edge of the mist. "Claire," I whispered. My voice broke. The shadow dissolved into nothing. I stayed awake until dawn, the oil lamp burning low, afraid that if I closed my eyes, I might never open them in the same world again. The next morning, I met her friends at the police station. They looked hollowed out, voices clipped with guilt. They explained the trail, how it wound into cedar forests, then up toward ridges scattered with shrines and forgotten markers. Claire had been ahead, eager to photograph the fading sun through the trees. She was laughing, they said, only minutes before she vanished. They had searched, calling her name until their throats turned raw. Nothing. Only the rustle of branches and, once, a sound like heavy breathing from the woods. They convinced themselves it was wind, because believing otherwise would mean surrendering to something ancient and merciless. I walked out of that station with the weight of their words pressing against my ribs. A part of me clung to rational explanations: wild animals, a misstep on loose soil, a fall into ravines. But another part, quieter and crueler, whispered that the mountain had claimed her. That afternoon, I wandered through the town. Shops were small, their shutters half closed. Elderly women burned incense in front of shrines, murmuring prayers I could not understand. When I asked about the mountain, most turned away, bowing slightly as if excusing themselves. One old woman finally spoke. "Not mountain, Oni mountain." She pressed her finger to her lips, warning silence, then shuffled away. It was then I began to notice the small details. Strips of paper charms nailed to wooden gates, half torn, straw ropes across path, as if to keep something in, not out. And at the edge of the town, facing the mountain, a line of stone statues of Jizo, guardian of lost travelers. Every statue's face was worn smooth by wind, their eyes hollow, their lips silent. Someone had draped them with red bibs, freshly washed, fluttering in the wind like faint bloodstains. That night again, I dreamed of her. She stood at the edge of my futon, her hair damp, her eyes filled with something that was not quite her. She whispered my name, soft, melodic, but her lips did not move. I woke with my heart pounding, sweat cooling on my skin. The futon was empty. Yet outside the paper door, faint footprints marked the wooden floorboards, as if wet soles had passed through. I told myself it was imagination, jet lag, stress, grief. But denial can only shield you for so long. On the third day, I decided I would climb that mountain myself. The officials discouraged me, saying it was unsafe. But there was no choice. Claire's voice lingered in every shadow. I could not return to America with silence. So I bought a lantern from the innkeeper. Its frame was iron, its glass cracked at one corner. He lit it for me, his hand trembling slightly. Before I left, he muttered in a low voice, "If you hear drums, do not follow. If you see her, do not speak." The words clung to me as I stepped toward the path that rose into cedar mist. The missing one was waiting, and so was the mountain. The morning air was sharper here, carrying the damp breath of cedar forests. I stepped out from the inn just as the sun was climbing behind the ridges. The light caught in veils of mist that clung stubbornly to the mountain slopes. The town beneath that mountain was not like the cities I knew. It moved slower, and silence carried weight, thicker than conversation, heavier than the bustle of Tokyo. Stone lanterns lined the narrow streets, moss eating at their bases, while prayer slips fluttered faintly on shrines no taller than my chest. The smell of smoke drifted from somewhere, charcoal or incense, I couldn't tell. What I knew was that every detail seemed to whisper the same thing. This was a place that remembered more than it cared to explain. I carried Claire's photograph in my pocket. Sometimes my hand would reach in, pressing against the paper edges, as if touch could keep her real. At the edge of the town, a group of villagers were gathered. Old women, bent with years, their hair coiled in gray knots. They were stringing red cloth around the necks of Jizo statues, the same ones I had noticed before. I stood watching, unsure whether to approach, when one of them turned. Her eyes were sharp despite her age, and she studied me as if she had been waiting. I bowed clumsily, remembering what little I knew of manners. Then I drew out the photograph. "My girlfriend," I said. "Claire, missing." The woman took the photo in her trembling hands. Her lips thinned, as though she recognized something, though I couldn't be sure. She spoke to the others, words I couldn't follow, but I caught one syllable, repeated, murmured like a warning. "Oni!" She returned the picture to me. Then she raised a finger to her lips, an unmistakable sign. Silence. No more questions. When she turned away, I noticed the red cloth she had tied was swaying in the breeze, a rhythm like a heartbeat. And for the first time, I wondered if the villagers were dressing those statues for protection or apology. I spent the rest of the morning at the police outpost. The officer there was young, his English halting but kind. He explained the boundaries of their search: paths combed, caves inspected, helicopters sweeping the ridges. Still nothing. His voice wavered when I pressed him, though, as if there were places beyond the official search, places they did not wish to enter. "Dangerous," he said finally. "Old paths. Not safe." But his eyes said something different. Not meant for us. I left with no answers. By afternoon, I wandered back into town. Shops with sliding wooden doors opened briefly, then shut as I passed. Children stopped their games to stare before being pulled inside by cautious mothers. It was as though my presence disturbed something fragile, as though my search threatened to draw notice from places better left alone. I ducked into a small tea house where the scent of roasted barley clung to the air. The hostess, a woman in her 50s, offered me a seat on the tatami mat. When I asked again about Claire, about the mountain, she hesitated. Her hands busied themselves with pouring tea, though her eyes avoided mine. At last, she said softly, "Foreign girl. They said she'd go up. Laughing. No respect. Only hear laughter." I asked what she meant. Her English faltered, but she leaned closer, lowering her voice until it was little more than a breath. "Only take who not belong." The tea in my hands suddenly felt too hot to drink. That evening, as lanterns began to glow in doorways, I walked the outskirts of the town. A path curved upward toward the woods, its entrance half blocked by a rope braided of straw, shimenawa, marked with zigzagging paper talismans. I had seen images of these in books, sacred boundaries, meant to ward or contain. Yet the rope here was frayed, sagging, as though something had passed through with little concern. The wind shifted then, carrying down from the slopes a sound I could not place. Not quite a drum, not quite a heartbeat. A dull thudding, far away, too regular to be the mountain settling. I froze, every nerve alive. It lasted only a few breaths, then faded into silence. I told myself it was echo, or some villager practicing taiko. But when I looked back, the houses below were shuttered, lanterns dimmed, as if no one wanted to acknowledge the sound at all. Night in that town was not like night elsewhere. It was heavy, suffocating, the darkness almost physical. The inn creaked as though something pressed against it from the outside. I lay on the futon, Claire's photograph beside me. Sleep came in waves, dragging me into dreams. I saw her again, standing at the edge of the forest, her scarf trailing in the wind. She lifted her hand as if beckoning, but when she smiled, her teeth were red, glistening. I woke with a start, the oil lamp flickering weakly. Outside, faintly, I heard it again, the click of wooden clogs on stone. Slow, measured, approaching. The inn's hallway was empty when I slid the door open. Only the lamp at the far end swayed slightly, though no breeze moved. The sound stopped. Silence thickened, heavy enough that my own breathing felt intrusive. I closed the door again, heart rattling, and whispered into the dark, "Claire, if you're here, don't follow me. Please." But silence gives no answers. The next morning I gathered what little courage I had left and went back to the edge of town, to the villagers tending the statues. I bowed again, holding Claire's photograph against my chest. "Please," I begged, "tell me, where did she go?" The eldest woman finally met my eyes. Her voice rasped like leaves against stone. "Mountain hungry, always hungry. She walk where we do not walk." Her words were simple, but they carved into me. I wanted to scream at her, to demand clarity, but something in her gaze silenced me. The same silence she had urged on me before. She turned, tightening the red cloth around the cold stone neck of another Jiso. "For you, be careful. Only like grief." Then she pressed a small bundle into my hand. Inside was a paper charm, drawn with black ink strokes I couldn't read. "Keep," she said, and that was all. That night, as I lay awake again in the dim room of the inn, the charm by my pillow, I thought about her words. Oni like grief. If that was true, then the mountain already knew my name. I woke with the decision heavy on my chest. If no one else would go where she had vanished, then I would. Grief leaves you with little choice. The innkeeper tried to dissuade me when he saw me gathering a lantern and a small pack. He shuffled toward me with hunched shoulders, his voice low, almost pleading. "Dangerous," he said in broken English. His eyes darted toward the mountain as if it could hear him. "No map, no way back." I bowed slightly, more in apology than in defiance. "Claire is still there," I told him. My words meant nothing to him, but the intent must have been clear enough. His face hardened with resignation. He rummaged behind the counter, then pressed a wrapped parcel into my hand. A rice ball, plain, bound in cloth. Perhaps a blessing, or simply an act of kindness he could not withhold. The morning sky was the color of ash as I set out. Mist pooled along the streets, curling around the base of the mountain. At the edge of the village, the same frayed Shimenawa rope sagged across a narrow opening in the trees. I ducked beneath it, my heart stammering, and stepped onto the forbidden path. The forest embraced me immediately. Cedar trunks rose like pillars, their tops lost in veils of fog. The ground was soft with fallen needles, muffling my footsteps so thoroughly that I felt like an intruder in some vast temple. The trail was faint but visible at first, marked by scattered stones that might once have been a walkway. As I climbed, I noticed how the air thickened, how the temperature shifted, colder, sharper, as though every step was leading me into another world. It wasn't long before I realized something odd. The trail was not on the maps I had studied. Claire's friends had spoken of a side path she had taken, but no official guidebook mentioned it. No signs pointed here. It was as though the mountain itself had hidden this road from human memory. And yet someone had walked here recently. I saw it in the torn paper charms lying half buried in moss. I saw it in the faint scuff of boots on stone. Claire had passed this way. Hours stretched. The silence was immense, broken only by the creak of branches and the occasional scatter of unseen creatures. Once I swore I heard laughter, thin, brittle, like glass chimes swaying in the wind. It came from behind me, though the path was empty. I forced myself onward. Then I reached the torii. It rose from the earth, half collapsed, its wooden beams dark with rot. Vines choked the cross piece, yet faint lettering was still visible beneath the moss. Prayers carved into its surface, their strokes eroded by time. I stepped through, and the air shifted instantly, denser, heavier, as if I had crossed not just a threshold, but a boundary of belonging. Beyond it, the path fractured. Stones lay broken, some overturned as though by immense force. Here and there were scraps of white paper charms nailed to trees, their ink long smeared by rain. They fluttered limply, whispering secrets to the mist. I touched one. The paper dissolved at my fingertips, disintegrating into powder. It was here that I found the first sign of Claire. Beneath a cedar root, half buried in damp soil, lay the lens cap of a camera. Her initials, CM, were scratched into the plastic, something she always did to keep her gear from getting mixed with others. My knees buckled when I picked it up. She had stood here. She had fumbled, dropped it, and then she had gone on. I pressed the cap to my lips before slipping it into my pocket, as though it could anchor her to me. But the forest was watching. I could feel it. The mist deepened as the path rose higher. Visibility shrank to a few feet, the trees looming like shadows with hidden faces. My lantern's light caught glimmers on the bark, claw marks, deep and ragged, as if something massive had raked through. I paused. The world around me was utterly still, so still that I could hear the blood in my ears. Then faintly came a sound, the dull thud, thud of something heavy. At first I thought it was my heartbeat, until it shifted rhythm. Drums. Taiko drums, resonant and slow, echoing through the mist. The same sound I had heard faintly from the village, now closer. I clutched the paper charm the old woman had given me. The ink seemed to warm against my palm. The drumming ceased as abruptly as it had begun, swallowed by silence. And in that silence I felt eyes on me. Not animal eyes. Too heavy, too knowing. My lantern flame shivered though no wind moved. I walked faster. The path narrowed to a ledge along a cliff face. Below, mist swallowed the valley. Above, jagged rock teeth tore into the sky. My feet slipped on damp stone, but I forced myself onward. At the end of the ledge, a second torii stood. This one shattered entirely, its beams lying across the path like bones. Beyond it, the trail vanished into darkness where trees grew too close, their branches knitting overhead to blot out the sun. I hesitated. Something primal screamed at me not to cross. The smell here was different, iron, wet and metallic, as though the earth itself bled. But Claire had come this way, and so I stepped into the dark. Inside that tunnel of trees, time distorted. My lantern's glow seemed weaker, my footsteps slower, as though the air thickened around me. I thought of stories I had read as a child, fairy paths that swallowed wanderers, trails that looped endlessly until madness set in. Was that what had happened to her? Had the mountains spun her in circles until she collapsed from exhaustion, alone in the mist? Or had something else guided her steps? At one point I found scraps of cloth snagged on a branch. Red, torn. Her scarf had been red. I held it in shaking hands. It was damp, smelling faintly of earth and something darker. Smoke, perhaps, or blood. A cry tore from my throat before I could stop it. It echoed through the tunnel of trees, sounding smaller, weaker than I expected. And somewhere far ahead, deep within the mist, something answered. Not Claire, not human. A low growl drawn out, like stone grinding against stone. I turned to run, but the path behind me was gone. Where there had once been a trail, there was now only a wall of trees, thick and impenetrable. The mountain had shifted, sealing me in. My lantern flickered violently. In its trembling light, I caught a glimpse between trunks. Two pinpricks of red, hovering, watching. They did not blink. I backed away slowly, clutching the charm, whispering her name like a prayer. The eyes did not move. They only glowed, steady, patient. Finally, the mist thickened until they dissolved, leaving me alone with the silence. When I stumbled out hours later, the path had returned, though not as I remembered it. Stones lay differently, charms hung in new places. It was as though the mountain had rearranged itself while I was inside, testing how far I would go. I collapsed beside the broken torii, my body trembling, my mind fraying at its edges. The scarf was still in my hand, proof she had been here, proof she had not returned. But the more I stared at it, the more I realized the truth pressing against me like the mountain's weight. Claire had stepped beyond where I had gone, beyond where I might be able to follow. The forgotten path was not just forgotten, it was forbidden. When I returned to the inn, night was already thick over the town. The mountains had swallowed the last trace of the sun, and the mist seemed heavier than before, pressing against rooftops, curling around lantern posts as if trying to smother their glow. The innkeeper was waiting at the doorway, lantern in hand. Its flame flickered orange against his weathered face, pulling shadows deep into the lines of his skin. He didn't ask where I had been. He didn't need to. The dirt on my clothes, the torn scarf in my fist, the hollow in my eyes told the story. Without a word, he guided me inside, down the creaking hallways, until we reached the small common room. He placed the lantern between us on the tatami floor and poured tea from a cracked kettle. The flame cast long shapes against the walls, making the paper screens ripple with imagined figures. For a long while, we sat in silence. I could hear the faint tap of wind against the shoji, like fingers searching for a way in. Finally, the innkeeper spoke, his English halting, each word chosen carefully. "You saw." I nodded. My throat was dry. The path, her scarf, eyes in the mist. The innkeeper's shoulders sagged as if a burden he had carried alone was now shared. He looked at me, his eyes dark pools reflecting the flame. "Long time ago," he began slowly, "other stranger, foreign girl, same mountain, same vanish." The words struck through me like cold steel. He leaned closer, his breath carrying the scent of tea leaves and old tobacco. "She stay here, like you. Smile, laugh. Next morning, go climb. Only lantern come back." He tapped the lantern between us. My skin prickled. Was this the same lantern? The glass was old, cracked at one edge. The iron frame bent as if scorched. He traced the crack with a gnarled finger. "Lantern return, not girl." The flame sputtered as if stirred by his words. My chest tightened. Claire had not been the first. There had been another, and perhaps more before her. I asked him what had happened. His gaze dropped, unwilling to meet mine. "Oni," he whispered, "mountain demon. Horns, red eyes, hungry spirit. Take who laugh, who wander, who not respect." I thought of Claire, her lightheartedness, her habit of laughing in the face of warnings, how she had loved pushing boundaries, stepping where signs said not to. It had been part of her charm and part of what frightened me about her. She didn't mean disrespect," I said weakly, as if defending her mattered to the mountain. The innkeeper shook his head. "Mountain not care. Oni not forgive." His words hung heavy between us, carried by the hiss of the lantern's flame. Then he told me something else, a detail that chilled me more than the mention of demons. "When girl vanish, people hear sound, not scream, not cry, just gugeta." He mimicked it, a clopping, hollow echo, the unmistakable rhythm of wooden gaita sandals. My stomach turned. That sound. I had heard it in the hallway of this very inn. Soft, deliberate steps, though no one had been there. I asked him if others in the village knew. He nodded once, slow. "All know, all silent, safer." I understood then why the villagers had turned away from me, why they spoke in fragments and warnings. Silence was their shield. To speak too much of the Oni was to invite its gaze. And here I was, tearing that silence apart with my desperate questions. The innkeeper reached for the lantern, lifting it with both hands as though it were fragile. He set it in front of me. "You take," he said, "for path, for night." I stared at the flame, uncertain. "Will it help me find her?" His eyes closed briefly, like a prayer. "Maybe, or maybe, only lantern come back." The words settled like stones in my stomach. Still, I took it. What else could I do? To refuse felt like abandoning her memory entirely. He touched the paper charm I had carried since the old woman gave it to me. His fingers lingered, then withdrew as if burned. "Keep close. Oni hate prayer, but Oni clever. Make you forget prayer." That night, I kept the lantern burning beside my futon. The room glowed faintly, shadows stretching long across the shoji screens. I lay awake, Claire's scarf pressed to my chest, listening to every sound. Somewhere past midnight, the lantern's flame flickered violently, as if something passed between it and me. I sat up, heart hammering, The hallway outside was no longer empty. Through the thin paper wall I saw it, a silhouette moving slowly, shoulders hunched, hair trailing long. The shadow paused at my door. "Claire?" I whispered. The figure tilted its head, unnaturally sharp, like a puppet pulled by a wire. Then the light shifted, and it was gone. I gripped the lantern tighter, whispering her name again, though deep down I knew. The mountain was already weaving illusions. When morning came, I found faint marks on the wooden floor outside my door. Impressions as though someone had stood there through the night. The innkeeper avoided my eyes when I showed him. He only muttered, "Lantern, keep you safe." This time, the words offered no comfort. I left the inn later that day, lantern in hand. The villagers watched me pass, their faces grim. Children clutched their mothers' robes, eyes wide. No one spoke, but I could feel their whispers gathering like a storm behind me. Every step toward the mountain felt heavier. I wondered if I was walking into her footsteps or into a trap laid by something older than memory. But there was no choice. Love is its own form of curse. It binds you, drags you where logic says not to go. The mountain waited, patient and silent, and the Oni, perhaps, was already walking beside me. The lantern was heavier than it looked. Its iron handle dug into my palm as I carried it down the narrow path that slipped out of the village and into the forest. The flame inside wavered, and with every step I feared it might vanish, leaving me blind in the mist. I had told myself I would wait for morning, that I would set out at dawn when the light was clean and the air less haunted. But grief is impatient. By the time the last rays of sun disappeared behind the ridges, I was already halfway to the foot of the mountain. The villagers did not follow. Their silhouettes lingered at the edges of the road, watching, silent as stones. One by one, they melted back into the glow of their lanterns, leaving me alone with the darkness. The forest received me like a mouth closing. Branches arched overhead, knitting into a ceiling that trapped the mist. The air was colder here, thick with the scent of cedar and damp earth. Each step sank into layers of needles, muffling the sound of my boots. The only rhythm came from the faint clop of the lantern's metal frame, tapping against itself as I walked. It wasn't long before the silence grew unbearable. The mountain did not sound like any wilderness I had known. No rustle of small animals. No wings slicing through the dark. Only the whisper of wind that seemed to circle me, never passing beyond. And then, laughter. It was faint at first, so faint I thought it was my memory conjuring her voice. Claire laughing the way she always did when she caught me worrying too much. Sharp, unguarded, alive. But the sound came from the trees. I stopped. My breath hung white in the air. "Claire!" No answer. Only another ripple of laughter, distant but clear. This time it was higher, shriller, too brittle to be hers. I tightened my grip on the lantern. The innkeeper's words echoed. "If you see her, do not speak." Yet the instinct to chase, to call, was almost overwhelming. The laughter came again, this time from behind me. I spun, lantern held high. The path was empty. Shadows pressed in from all sides, tall and lean like watching figures. I walked faster, each step echoing in my ears. But the laughter followed, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, always just out of reach. It rose and fell like a cruel game, mocking, testing. When I broke into a small clearing, the sound stopped. The silence that followed was worse. In the center of the clearing stood a weathered Jizo statue, its stone face eaten by moss, its features worn away. A red cloth hung from its neck, torn and soaked dark at the edges, as though stained. I approached slowly, lantern raised. Something had been scratched into the earth at its base, marks like long, parallel claws, digging deep into the soil as if something had circled the statue again and again. The laughter returned, faint, curling around me like smoke. It was not coming from the trees this time. It was coming from the statue. I stumbled back, choking on the sudden chill that gripped the air. The lantern's flame flickered violently, threatening to die. I pressed the paper charm against the iron frame, whispering words I didn't know but needed to believe. The laughter cracked, broke apart into a sound like sobbing. Then silence. I don't know how long I stood there trembling. Eventually my legs carried me onward, deeper into the forest. The path narrowed again, hemmed in by trees so tall their tops vanished into darkness. My lantern painted brief shapes on the bark. Faces that weren't there when I looked directly, eyes that vanished when I blinked. Then I saw her. Claire. She was standing among the trees, scarf trailing red in the lantern glow. Her body was half turned, her face caught in a smile that froze me in place. Claire, I whispered before I could stop myself. Her smile widened, unnatural, stretching until it split into a grin too large for her face. And then she dissolved, scattering into mist like ash. I ran. Branches tore at my jacket, roots caught my boots, but I didn't stop until the path spilled me out near a stream. Water gurgled quietly, the first natural sound I had heard since leaving the village. I collapsed beside it, gasping, dipping my hands into the cold. But even here, the mountain would not leave me in peace. The water shimmered strangely, reflecting not my face but Claire's. She was staring up at me from the current, eyes wide, lips moving soundlessly. I leaned closer, desperate to hear, when the reflection changed. Her face stretched, horns tearing from her forehead, eyes bleeding into red fire. The lantern's flame roared suddenly, flaring high. The reflection shattered, leaving only black water. I fell back, clutching the lantern as if it were my only tether. Perhaps it was. The night dragged on without measure. Every step forward felt like walking into the belly of something alive. I realized then what the monk must have meant when he said the oni fed on grief. The more desperate I became, the more the mountain twisted itself around me. Laughter, illusions, shadows, each one gnawing at the edges of my sanity. By the time I stumbled back toward the village, dawn was bleeding into the horizon. My legs shook. My throat ached from calling her name. The villagers were waiting, silent as always. Their eyes moved to the lantern in my hand, still burning, and then to my face. They said nothing, but I could feel the question pressing from them all. Was it only the lantern that returned again? I had no answer, only the echoes of laughter that still rang in my ears. The morning broke gray, its light smothered by a veil of mist that poured from the mountain like breath. I had not slept more than an hour, yet the decision was already made. I would climb again, waiting for clarity, for rescue teams, for reason. None of it mattered anymore. Claire's scarf was still clenched in my pack, and I could feel its damp weight like an anchor. The villagers watched as I set out, their faces half hidden behind shoji doors and paper lanterns. Some bowed faintly, not in encouragement but in farewell, and they knew the mountain seldom returned what it claimed. The path greeted me with silence. Even the cicadas that had buzzed faintly the day before were gone. My lantern swung in rhythm with my steps, its flames straining against the fog. The deeper I went, the more the world narrowed, as though the mist had teeth, chewing away at everything but the trail beneath me. By midday, I reached a ridge where the trees thinned. The view should have stretched across valleys, but all I saw was whiteness, an ocean of fog rolling and folding in on itself. It was beautiful in a way, but unsettling, like staring at a blank canvas that might reveal anything at all. And then I heard it. Thud. A low vibration, distant yet distinct, like a drum beat echoing from some unseen hall. It came once, then again, steady as a heartbeat. Thud, thud, thud. The sound wrapped around me, impossible to locate. It might have been below, above, or inside my own chest. I froze, gripping the lantern. Its flame trembled violently, casting frantic shadows. I remembered the innkeeper's warning. If you hear drums, do not follow. But what else could I do? The sound was already here, finding me. The beats grew louder, closer, not rapid, but deliberate, ritualistic. Each one seemed to stir the fog, sending ripples through the air. My breath matched their rhythm without my consent, as though my body wanted to sync with the unseen drum. I whispered her name, Claire. The moment the word left my lips, the drum stopped. Silence crashed down, heavier than before. Even the mist seemed to pause. Then faintly came something worse, a sigh. Not human, not wind. A guttural exhale that carried weight, like stone grinding against stone. I backed away, nearly tripping on the uneven ridge. My lantern's light caught the trees behind me, and for a heartbeat, I swore I saw something move. A shadow broader than any human, horns catching the edge of the glow before vanishing. I hurried down the path, my pulse racing. The fog thickened, curling around me in shifting shapes. Once or twice I thought I heard footsteps pacing beside mine, heavy, dragging. But when I stopped, they stopped too. Soon the path split at a weathered marker stone. One route curved back toward the village. The other led deeper, swallowed almost immediately by fog. Claire's friends had said she took a side trail, one not on the maps. My gut told me this was it. I chose the deeper path. The forest closed in again, the cedar trunks dark as iron pillars. Every sound was magnified, the scrape of my boots, the rasp of my breath, the faint rattle of the lantern's frame. Somewhere in that layering of noise, a new sound entered, soft, rhythmic, out of sync with my own steps. Footsteps. They were not hurried nor shy. They followed, steady and patient. When I stopped, they stopped. When I walked, they resumed. I turned sharply, lantern raised. The path was empty. Fog coiled through the trees, thick enough to hide anything. Yet I knew I was not alone. The footsteps faded eventually, but the unease clung like damp cloth. By the time I emerged into another clearing, my body ached with tension. In the center of the clearing lay a stone platform, cracked and moss-covered. It looked like the remains of an old shrine. On its surface rested a drum, large, barrel-shaped. Its hide stretched taut, though the leather was rotted with age. The moment I saw it, my stomach turned. The beats I had heard, they had come from here. I approached cautiously, lantern light sweeping across the surface. The drum bore long slashes as though clawed. Yet when I leaned closer, I realized the leather was not cracked from time. It was fresh, damp, stained dark in streaks that could only be blood. My hand trembled. The air smelled of iron. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the lantern, and then, faintly, the drum sounded, thud. No hand struck it. No mallets touched its surface. But the beat was there, deep, resonant, vibrating through my bones. I fled the clearing, heart slamming harder than the drum itself. The sound followed me, echoing through the trees, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, sometimes inside my skull. The fog thickened until I could barely see my own feet. My lantern's flame guttered low, struggling to hold back the dark. At last, the beat slowed, faded, and vanished. I collapsed against a tree, gasping, the charm pressed against my chest. My body shook with exhaustion, but my mind refused to rest. The mountain was not just haunted, it was alive, and it was listening. When I finally staggered back toward the village, dusk was sinking. The lantern still burned, though its light seemed weaker, as if drained by the mountain. The villagers glanced at me from their doorways, eyes wide, lips sealed. None asked what I had seen. None needed to. That night, as I lay in the inn with the lantern by my side, I heard it again. Faint, distant, carried on the wind through the shoji screens. Thud, thud, thud. The mountain was drumming still, and I realized with dread certainty that it was not summoning me. It was warning me. I woke before dawn, the lantern's flame guttering low beside me. Sleep had been fractured, filled with fragments of drums and shadows pressing close against the paper screens. When the sky began to pale, I rose, knowing I could not stay within the safety of four walls any longer. The villagers did not meet my eyes as I left. Perhaps they already saw what I refused to admit, that every step I took into the mountain was another step away from the world of the living. The forest swallowed me quickly. Mist clung low to the ground, swirling in faint patterns that seemed almost deliberate. The cedar trunks loomed high, their bark slick with dew, their branches interlaced like ribs. I followed the narrow trail upward, breath fogging in the chill air. The silence was complete until it wasn't. A snap echoed behind me, a branch breaking under weight heavier than mine. I froze, lantern lifted. The flame trembled, casting rings of light that revealed nothing but fog. I forced myself forward. Another snap. Closer. The air thickened, carrying with it a scent metallic and sharp, like rusted iron. I knew that smell. Blood. The path opened briefly into a glade. Here the fog thinned enough for me to see across the space. That was when I noticed them. Two glimmers suspended in the mist. Eyes. They glowed faintly red, steady and unblinking, higher than any humans, too far apart. My stomach clenched. I whispered Claire's name, not as a call but as a plea for strength. The eyes did not move. They only watched. The flame of my lantern hissed, shrinking as though smothered by their gaze. I clutched the charm against its frame. Not real, I told myself, not real. But the eyes blinked. A low growl rolled through the glade, vibrating in my chest. The red orbs shifted slightly, rising as if the thing had stood taller. For one suspended moment, I felt certain it would rush forward, and I would finally see the horns, the face, the claws. Instead, the eyes retreated, fading back into fog until nothing remained. The growl dissolved into silence. I stood shaking, breath shallow, knees weak. My heart begged me to turn back, to return to the village, to abandon this madness. But the scarf in my pack was heavier than fear. Claire had come farther than this. So must I. The trail grew crueler, stones slick with moss, roots like claws reaching to trip me. My boots slipped often, scraping my shins, but I pressed on. The mist grew denser the higher I climbed, until I could barely see my own hands. Then I heard it again. Footsteps. This time, heavy, deliberate, pacing me from the side. I swung the lantern toward the sound. Nothing. But the flame quivered as if something massive had just stepped aside. A whisper followed. Low, guttural, a language I could not understand. The syllables slid like broken glass, painful to hear. I covered my ears, but the voice was inside my skull. Leave. That single word carved itself clear through the haze of sounds. My knees buckled, but I forced myself upright, stumbling onward, refusing to obey. Eventually, the path narrowed into a ravine, walls of stone pressing close. My lantern's glow reflected faintly off wet surfaces, revealing streaks dark as dried blood. The air smelled of earth and something decayed. Halfway through, I looked up and froze. The eyes were above me. Two glowing red orbs stared down from the lip of the ravine, higher than any tree. They burned brighter than before, wide and merciless. A roar split the air, deafening, shaking loose stones from the cliffs. I stumbled, covering my head as rocks clattered around me. The lantern's flame flared wildly, then steadied, as though defying the roar itself. When I dared look again, the eyes were gone. I collapsed at the end of the ravine, lungs burning, hands raw from clutching stone. The world spun, but one thought anchored me. It was real. Not illusion, not imagination. I had seen the Oni's eyes, and they had seen me. By the time I returned to the village, night had fallen. The innkeeper said nothing when I entered, but his glance lingered on the lantern. Its flame was dimmer, weaker than before, as though part of it had been stolen. I sat in the tatami room, scarf in my lap, lantern by my side, and tried to steady my breathing. But all I could see, even with eyes closed, were those red orbs glowing in the mist, watching, waiting, promising that this was only the beginning. I do not remember how I found the path. One moment I was stumbling through cedar mist, the next I was standing before a staircase of stone, half buried in moss. It rose into the fog, uneven and crumbling, like teeth jutting from the earth. Something in me knew Claire had walked here. Her presence clung to the air, faint but undeniable, the way perfume lingers in an empty room. The lantern's light stretched long shadows as I climbed. Each step groaned beneath my weight, stones shifting as if reluctant to hold me. At the top, the staircase ended at a gate. Torii wood blackened and cracked, its crossbeam broken in half. Beyond it stood a shrine, or what was left of one. The roof sagged, tiles scattered. Doors hung crooked, one torn from its frame. The offering box was split open, its coins green with rust. Paper charms dangled from beams, their ink blurred into nothing. I stood at the threshold, lantern trembling in my grip. Shrines were supposed to guard against darkness, but this place felt abandoned, even by gods. Inside, the air was heavy, thick with dust and the faint scent of something sour, blood or decay. I raised the lantern. Its glow caught on dozens of faces staring back at me. Masks, Oni masks, painted in crimson and black, their horns sharp, their mouths open in eternal snarls. They hung from the rafters, some intact, some cracked, some rotted by damp. Their eyes glittered in the lantern light, giving the illusion of movement as though they shifted to follow me. At the far wall, one mask stood apart, larger, darker, its features carved with disturbing precision. Unlike the others, its surface glistened wet, as though freshly painted or freshly fed. A bead of moisture trickled from its lip, dripping onto the floor. The stain spread black across the wood. I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to turn back, to flee down the stairs, but my eyes caught on something near the offering box. Claire's camera. It lay on its side, scratched, its strap frayed. I dropped to my knees, hands shaking as I picked it up. The lens was cracked, but the body was intact. My breath caught. If the memory card had survived, it might hold the last moments she recorded. With trembling fingers, I opened the compartment. The card was still inside. I slipped it into my pocket, whispering, "Thank you," though I wasn't sure to whom. To her, to the shrine that had no god, to the mountain itself. The lantern flickered suddenly, drawing my gaze back to the masks. Their expressions seemed sharper now, their mouths wider, as though they were grinning. A laugh echoed through the shrine, high, distorted, curling through the rafters. My blood froze. I raised the lantern, sweeping the light. Empty. Only masks. Then I realized the laugh had not come from outside. It had come from the camera in my hand. I dropped it instinctively. The laugh cut off, replaced by silence so heavy it roared in my ears. The large mask on the far wall tilted slightly, though no wind stirred. I staggered back. My heel struck something soft. The scarf. Claire's scarf. It lay in the dust, torn further than when I had found it before. My heart broke at the sight, but when I bent to pick it up, a shadow stretched across it, horned, towering, blocking the lantern's glow. I spun around. Nothing. Only the door frame gaping open behind me. The scarf was warm when I clutched it, too warm, as if just taken from her body. I fled the shrine, stumbling down the steps until my legs gave way. The forest swallowed me, mist thick and pressing. For a long while I sat there, clutching the scarf and the camera, lantern guttering beside me. I told myself it had been imagination, tricks of fear and exhaustion. But when I raised the camera again, the lens reflected not my face but hers. Claire, pale, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. The image rippled, horns pushing through her forehead, red light spilling from her gaze. Then it vanished, leaving only my own terrified reflection. By the time I staggered back to the inn, dawn was bleeding through the fog. The innkeeper did not ask where I had gone. He only stared at the camera in my hand, his face folding into something between pity and fear. "You bring back," he said quietly, "but not her." I wanted to scream at him, to demand answers. Instead, I collapsed onto the tatami, clutching the scarf, the camera, the lantern. I could not escape the truth that gnawed at me. Claire had stood in that shrine. She had seen what I had seen, and whatever had taken her had left only fragments, cloth, glass, shadows. The mountain was not giving her back. The camera haunted me through the night. I left it on the tatami beside the lantern, but each time I drifted toward sleep, I swore I heard faint clicks, the shutter opening, closing, though no one touched it. Once, in half-dream, I thought I saw the flash go off, illuminating Claire's face above me, her eyes hollow, her mouth whispering words I could not hear. By morning, I could not stand the weight of that room. I took the camera, scarf, and lantern and stepped out into the mist. I did not know where I was going, only that my feet carried me along a narrow path away from the village. The road wound through rice fields, their stubble drowned in fog. At the far edge stood a structure I had not noticed before, a small temple, weathered but upright, its roof curved like folded wings. Smoke drifted faintly from inside. A monk lived there. He was old though not frail, with eyes that seemed carved from stone. His robe was patched but clean, and his hands bore ink stains, as if he spent his days writing charms. He looked at me without surprise, as though he had been expecting me. "You carry grief," he said in halting English. His voice was low, steady. "The mountain knows." I bowed awkwardly, unsure what to say. I showed him Claire's scarf, the camera, the lantern. His gaze lingered longest on the scarf, then on the camera. He did not touch either. "She is gone," he said flatly. "But not finished." My throat tightened. "What do you mean?" The monk turned, motioning me to follow. Inside the temple, the air smelled of incense and cedar. Wooden statues lined the walls. Bodhisattvas, guardians, but many were covered with cloth, faces hidden. Only one stood bare, a figure of Fudo Mu, fierce, holding a sword, flames rising behind him. The monk lit a stick of incense and placed it before the statue. "Oni," he said, "not beast, not ghost, curse." He sat cross-legged, gesturing for me to do the same. Long ago, mountain was sacred. People climb, give prayer. But one man, he break vow. Promise to guard, but he betray. Blood spilled, his spirit twist. Become Oni, mountain curse born. His words were broken, but the meaning was clear enough. The Oni was not merely an animal hiding in the forest. It was born of betrayal, oaths broken, promises shattered. "Why her?" I asked. My voice shook. "Why Claire?" The monk studied me for a long moment, as though weighing whether I deserved the answer. Finally, he said, "Mountain take who laugh, who forget respect, who carry arrogance." I saw her face then, bright with amusement, teasing me for worrying too much. I saw how she had strayed from the group, eager to capture the perfect photograph. My chest tightened with guilt. She had not meant arrogance. She had only been alive, unafraid. "Grief feed Oni," the monk continued. "It grows stronger when you search, when you beg. It eat memory too. Soon you forget her face." The thought struck harder than any blow. To lose her was one thing. To forget her, that was annihilation. I demanded to know if there was a way to fight it, to save her, to bring her back. The monk closed his eyes. "Cannot bring back, only release. Maybe." He reached into a wooden chest and withdrew a bundle of paper charms, bound with red thread. Their ink was fresh, strokes sharp and deliberate. He placed them in my hands. "Carry. Oni hate prayer, but Oni clever. It show you what you want. It make you choose wrong." His eyes bored into mine. "You see her," She call you. Not her. Never her. I swallowed hard, remembering the figure in the mist, the reflection in the water, the face in the camera lens. My heart wanted to believe each vision, but my mind, here now, knew better. Still, I asked, if I face it, what happens? The monk's lips pressed thin. You pay. Oni never leave without price. As I rose to leave, he stopped me with a final warning. Night come, do not sleep outside. If drum call, close ears. If laugh come, burn charm. If eyes watch, do not meet them. I nodded, clutching the bundle. He added softly, almost to himself, sometimes mountain not kill, it keep. Worse. The words clung to me as I stepped back into the fog. By the time I returned to the inn, the villagers seemed even more distant. They watched me clutching the charms, whispering among themselves. I could feel their fear, not for me, but for what I might awaken by climbing higher. That night I spread the charms around my futon. The lantern burned between them, its flames steady for the first time in days. I closed my eyes, but Claire's voice came anyway, soft, tender, calling my name. I wanted to answer. My lips trembled with the urge, but the monk's warning echoed, not her, never her. I stayed silent. When I opened my eyes, the room was empty, yet the scarf was no longer where I had left it. It hung from the wall, tied in a knot, swaying faintly though there was no wind. The monk's warning followed me like a second shadow. Even as I packed the scarf, the lantern, the charms into my bag, his voice pressed in. Sometimes the mountain does not kill, it keeps. That night I decided to test the truth of his words. I spread the charms again around my futon, set the lantern at the center, and tried to sleep. But sleep was not mercy, it was a door. And when it opened, I walked through. The dream began in silence. I stood on the mountain path, but it was no longer covered in mist. Instead, the trees leaned outward, their branches straining as if dragged by invisible chains. The sound came then, metal grating on stone, chains dragging. The rhythm was heavy, slow, yet purposeful, as if something massive was being pulled against its will. I turned and saw her. Claire. She stood in the clearing, arms bound by thick iron links. They wrapped her wrists, her waist, even her throat, and yet she did not struggle. She only stared at me, her eyes wide, pleading. Help me, she whispered. The words were clear, but her lips did not move. I ran toward her, but the ground stretched, lengthening into a corridor of endless cedar trunks. Each step pulled me farther, not closer. Chains scraped louder, circling, until I realized they did not bind only her. They circled me too. Something yanked my ankle. I looked down. Iron links coiled around my leg, dragging me backward. I clawed at them, nails breaking, but they tightened, cutting into flesh. The lantern's glow appeared suddenly at the edge of the dream, swinging, distant. I lunged toward it, dragging the chains, my throat burning with Claire's name. She reached out, fingers trembling, but her hands stopped inches short, as though glass separated us. Her face twisted, her eyes glowing faint red. Not me, she mouthed. Don't follow. Then she was yanked into darkness, the chains clattering like laughter. I woke screaming. The lantern beside me nearly toppled. My futon was soaked in sweat. For a moment I thought it had been only a dream, until I saw the bruises. Dark bands wrapped my wrists and ankles, the clear imprint of chains. The villagers avoided me that morning. When I tried to ask questions, they shut their doors. Even the innkeeper, usually willing to offer a word, would not meet my gaze. Only one old woman muttered as I passed, Oni choose. Now too late. By dusk, I could no longer stay inside. The chains in my dreams still dragged through my ears, metallic, endless. I left the inn with the lantern and climbed again, ignoring the ache in my legs. The path wound steep, the fog thick as wool. The drums had not returned, but something worse had, whispers. They floated through the mist, fragments of voices I knew. Claire's laugh, my own name. Words she had once spoken to me, ordinary, intimate, now twisted, stretched into something hollow. At one bend, I swore I saw her silhouette again. This time she was kneeling, her arms pulled taut by chains that vanished into the trees. I raised the lantern, and she dissolved, leaving only claw marks etched deep into the bark. The shrine ruins reappeared at the edge of the fog, but I could not bring myself to enter again. Instead, I collapsed outside, the lantern casting a small circle of light. I pulled the scarf from my pack, pressing it to my face, breathing in its faint trace of her. The whispers quieted, the air grew unnaturally still. Then the sound returned, not drums, not laughter, chains. They rattled from the forest floor, slithering closer, circling. The earth trembled faintly with each pull. My heart seized. I pressed the charm to my chest, whispering prayers I didn't know, any sound that might hold back the dark. The lantern flared suddenly, burning higher than it should. In its light I saw them, iron links coiling from the fog, dragging across roots and stone, twisting into shapes that resembled hands, faces, horns. And in the center of that shifting mass, I glimpsed her again. Claire's eyes wide, desperate. "Help me!" Her voice was thin, fading. The chains pulled her back even as she reached forward. I lunged, nearly toppling the lantern, my hands stretching. But the monk's warning cut through. "It will show you what you want. It will make you choose wrong." I froze. The figure wavered, horns glinting faintly where her hair should have been. The eyes reddened, glowing. And then she smiled, too wide, too sharp. The vision collapsed. The chains recoiled into the mist, vanishing like smoke. I was left kneeling in the dirt, chest heaving, scarf crushed in my grip. The forest was silent again, but silence no longer meant safety. It meant the mountain was waiting. I staggered back to the village near dawn, too broken to continue, too stubborn to stop. The monk's words haunted me with every step. Sometimes the mountain does not kill, it keeps. I knew now what he meant. Claire was still there, bound, caught between life and something worse. And if I wasn't careful, I would be too. The chains did not leave me, even when I returned to the village. Their echo followed, metal on stone, scraping inside my skull. I could not rest. The scarf on the futon looked less like fabric and more like a tether, dragging me back to the mountain. At dawn, I told myself one truth. If Claire was still bound, then the only place left to find her was deeper. Not on the paths, not in the shrines. The mountain itself had a heart, and I had to enter it. The villagers said nothing as I walked through their streets. They watched from behind shutters, some whispering prayers, others turning away as though I were already dead. The innkeeper did not appear. Only the monk was waiting near the edge of the rice fields. "You go where no prayer reach," he said, voice grave. "The cave. Oni's breath lives there." I bowed slightly, clutching the lantern. His eyes lingered on me with something between pity and finality. "If you see her," he warned again, "remember, Oni clever, not her. Never her." Then he turned back to his temple, leaving me to the fog. The trail wound steeper, stones slick, trees thinning. Hours passed, the world shrinking until only mist and silence remained. When the sun should have been high, the light dimmed instead, smothered by a haze so thick it bled red, as if the mountain itself exhaled iron. That was how I found the cave. It gaped from the cliffside like a wound, its edges jagged, its depths veiled in crimson fog. The air that poured from it was damp, metallic and warm, like breath against skin. The lantern shook in my hand. For a long time I stood at the threshold, heart hammering. Everything in me screamed to turn back. But Claire's voice, soft and desperate, seemed to rise from the mist. "Please." I stepped inside. The walls pressed close at first, slick with condensation. My footsteps splashed in shallow water that smelled of rust. The further I walked, the more the fog thickened, glowing faintly red as though lit from within. The cave pulsed. I felt it in my bones, an uneven rhythm, like a heartbeat too slow to be human. With every pulse, droplets fell from the ceiling, splattering like blood on stone. Then came the chains. They clinked faintly at first, echoing deeper within, then louder, dragging, rattling. The sound filled every crack of the cave, until it was impossible to know where it began or ended. Claire? My whisper felt like betrayal against the silence. The chains answered. I followed the noise until the tunnel widened into a cavern. My lantern revealed walls etched with claw marks, deep gouges that must have been carved by something stronger than stone. Bones littered the floor. Animal, human, impossible to tell. Some still bore scraps of cloth, rotted and black. In the center stood an altar of rock. Upon it lay offerings long decayed, bowls of ash, broken charms, fragments of masks. And above the altar, chains dangled from the ceiling, swaying as though stirred by breath. The mist parted, and she appeared. Claire. Her body was draped in chains, wrists pulled high, feet barely touching the stone. Her head hung, hair shadowing her face. When she looked up, her eyes glistened with tears. "Ethan," she whispered, "you found me." My knees nearly gave way. I stumbled forward, lantern trembling. "Claire, hold on! I'll get you out!" But as I stepped closer, her face shifted in the light. Her eyes glowed faintly red, her lips stretching into a smile too wide. The monk's warning rang sharp. Not her. Never her. I froze. My mind screamed it was a trick, but my heart clawed against my ribs. She wept again, chains rattling. "Please, I'm real. Don't leave me." The chains tightened, dragging her higher. Her body twisted unnaturally, bones cracking. She screamed, a sound that split the cavern, shattering into echoes. I clamped my hands over my ears. The lantern flared, throwing wild shadows on the walls. For an instant I saw it. Behind her, rising from the red mist. The Oni. Its form was immense, horned, shoulders hunched. Its face shifted like liquid, now human, now monstrous, jaws filled with teeth. Red eyes burned like coals fixed on me. The cavern shook as it exhaled, a breath heavy with decay. The chains slithered, tightening around Claire, dragging her deeper into its chest as though it were part of the mountain itself. "Choose," it rumbled, voice reverberating through stone. "Her or you?" My body trembled. Every instinct screamed to rush forward, to tear the chains, to save her. But I remembered the monk's words, the illusions, the tricks. I knew, if I touched her now, if I believed this was truly her, I would never leave this cave. I backed away slowly, heart shattering. Her scream followed, her voice splintering into laughter, then into silence. The Oni's eyes glowed brighter, swelling, filling the cavern with crimson. My lantern's flame guttered, nearly dying. I held the charm high, whispering the fragments of prayers the monk had given me. The Oni recoiled slightly, its form distorting in the light. The chains slackened, and the vision of Claire dissolved into mist, leaving nothing but stone. The cavern groaned. The red fog thickened, pressing against me like water. My lungs burned. I ran. The cave tried to keep me. Passages twisted, tunnels collapsed. Each step dragged like walking through blood. But somehow the lantern's flicker guided me, tugging me toward the mouth of the cave. When I burst into open air, I collapsed on the rocks, gasping, the morning light pale against my skin. The fog still bled red from the cave, curling like smoke, as if warning me not to return. The monk had been right. The mountain did not kill. It kept, and now it had her. The cave spat me out like a dying breath, but the mountain was not done with me. I staggered back toward the village, yet the path blurred. Mist folded upon itself, reshaping the forest into places I did not recognize. The air carried whispers, soft, coaxing, until I realized they formed her name. Ethan. I froze. The voice was hers, warm, familiar, the same tone she used when waking me in the mornings back home. I wanted to run toward it, to believe she had somehow escaped the cave. But the monk's words anchored me. Oni clever. Not her. Never her. Still, love is its own weakness. I wandered deeper into the fog, guided not by reason, but by that voice. It led me to a small clearing I had never seen before. At its center stood a single cherry tree, though it was autumn and no blossoms should have remained. Yet here, pale petals drifted in slow motion, glowing faintly against the mist. Beneath the tree sat Claire. She wore the red scarf I had carried all this time. Her hair framed her face in waves, her eyes luminous and alive. She looked up and smiled, the kind of smile that once unraveled every guard I kept. "Ethan," she said softly, "it's over. You found me." My heart broke open. My knees buckled as I rushed forward, lantern swinging. For a moment I forgot everything. The cave, the chains, the eyes. There was only her. I knelt before her, trembling hands reaching to touch her face. Warm, solid, real. She leaned into my palm, sighing. "You don't have to be afraid anymore. We can leave. Together." Tears blurred my vision. "Claire, I thought I lost you." "You never lost me," she whispered. "I was waiting." Her lips brushed mine, soft, familiar, perfect. For a heartbeat, the nightmare cracked, and I was back in our apartment in the city, her laughter filling the room, coffee on the stove. But then I felt it. Her mouth was cold, not cool from the air, but lifeless, like ice pressed against skin. And when I opened my eyes, her gaze glowed faint red. The scarf around her neck was not cloth at all. It was chain, thin links tightening as I stared. I jerked back. She tilted her head, smile widening unnaturally. "Don't you love me?" "Yes," I whispered, though fear strangled the word. "Then stay." The cherry blossoms around us darkened, petals curling into ash. The tree twisted, branches bending into horns. Her face rippled, shifting, half Claire, half the Oni's grotesque mask. She reached for me, fingers elongating into claws. The lantern flared violently, spilling light across the clearing. For an instant, the illusion shattered. The tree was gone, the blossoms gone. Claire's figure flickered, her body bound in chains once more, her face twisted in agony. "Help me," she screamed, voice splitting into laughter, then into silence. I stumbled back, clutching the lantern. The mist closed in, suffocating. The charm in my pocket burned against my thigh, searing as if reminding me of the monk's warning. I ripped it free and held it high, shouting words I barely knew. The figure hissed, convulsed, then split apart into smoke. The clearing dissolved. I was alone, chest heaving, lantern trembling in my grasp. But the words she had spoken lingered, venom in my veins. "Don't you love me? Then stay." I made my way back to the village as dusk fell. The innkeeper looked at me once, shook his head and walked away. No questions, no words. Perhaps he had seen this too many times before. That night I could not close my eyes. Each time I tried, I saw her face, first smiling, then shifting, then screaming. I held the scarf to my chest, desperate to believe some part of her was still real. The monk's voice echoed within me. "The Oni shows you what you want. It makes you choose wrong." And I knew. The mountain had not just taken her body, it had taken my love, reshaped it into a weapon against me. When dawn came, I lit the lantern again. Its flame was weaker, but it still held. I whispered into the silence, not sure if I spoke to her, or to myself, or to the mountain. "I will see this through, even if it kills me." The mist stirred as if in answer. And somewhere within it, faint and cruel, came her laughter. By the time I left the inn again, my body felt like it no longer belonged to me. Sleep had become impossible. The mountain filled every silence with Claire's voice, every shadow with her shape. I carried the lantern, the scarf, the charms, but I knew they were fragile things against something as vast and patient as the Oni. The villagers no longer looked at me. They acted as though I had already crossed into another realm, one where they could not follow. Perhaps I had. The path to the cave was easier this time, not because the mountain relented, but because it wanted me back. The mist parted almost politely, revealing the entrance like an open mouth. The red haze poured from its depths, breathing against my face, tasting of iron and smoke. I stepped inside. The cavern pulsed as before, but louder now, each beat shaking the ground beneath me. The lantern's flame flickered violently, struggling against the thick fog. My footsteps echoed, multiplied, until I felt I was walking beside a crowd I could not see. And then the voice came. "You return." It was not spoken aloud. It resonated through the stone, the mist, the marrow of my bones. At the heart of the cavern, the Oni waited. It rose from the fog, immense, horns curling like branches, shoulders hunched beneath the weight of centuries. Its face shifted with every blink. One moment Claire's, the next a grotesque mask of tusks and fangs. Its eyes burned steady red, unblinking, merciless. Chains rattled from the ceiling, dragging across the altar. At their center hung her, Claire's form, bound, suspended, head bowed. When she looked up, her eyes were wet with tears. "Ethan," she whispered, "please, save me." The Oni's laughter rolled like thunder. "Choose!" The word crushed me. The Oni uncoiled one massive arm, claws scraping the rock. With its other hand it lifted Claire higher, chains tightening around her chest. Her body convulsed, choking for air. "Choose," it repeated, "her or you." My knees buckled. The lantern shook so violently I feared it would break. Every part of me screamed to rush forward, to tear the chains, to hold her once more. But memory clawed back. The monk's warning, the illusions, the tree of blossoms that had not been real. Still she cried my name, voice cracking, so human, so familiar. "Ethan!" I took one step forward. The Oni's eyes flared, brighter, eager. Its teeth split into a grin. But then I saw it, the scarf around her neck. The same scarf I held in my pack, the real one, torn and stained. This was not her. This was another mask. I staggered back, chest heaving. "You're not Claire." Her form writhed, twisted. The tears turned to blood, running black down her cheeks. Her face warped, splitting at the mouth until horns jutted from her brow. The Oni roared, chains thrashing against stone. "You refuse!" The cavern convulsed. Rocks split, dust rained down. The Oni rose higher, towering, its eyes flooding the chamber with crimson. "You do not save her. You do not save yourself." It lunged, claws reaching. I hurled the charms, pressing them against the lantern's glass. The flame erupted, white-hot, searing the air. The Oni shrieked, staggering back, its form flickering between human and beast, shadow and flesh. For one heartbeat, I saw Claire's true face again. Still bound, still screaming. Then she dissolved, consumed by the red mist. The Oni steadied, its grin returning. "She is mine. She was always mine." I ran. The cavern twisted, chains whipping from the walls, clawing at my arms and legs. The lantern's flame sputtered, nearly dying. I pressed the scarf to it, whispering prayers I did not know, and somehow the flame steadied again. The Oni's voice chased me, echoing through the stone. "You love her. That is your sin, and your punishment." I stumbled into the tunnel, lungs burning, heart collapsing under the weight of those words. Behind me the cavern roared shut, as if the mountain itself sealed its mouth. When I reached the surface, the air was pale. the mist thin. Dawn had arrived again, but its light felt sickly, drained. I collapsed on the rocks, clutching the lantern. The flame flickered weak, but it lived. The verdict had been spoken. The Oni had claimed her, not with claws or teeth, but with chains of love and grief I could never cut. And worse, I knew now that it was not finished, because the Oni had seen me, tasted me, judged me, and in its judgment, I was already half-bound. The mountain was silent when I left the cave. Not empty, not calm, silent, like a predator resting after a meal. The mist thinned as I stumbled down the trail, but the silence stayed, pressing against my ears until I could hear only my own ragged breath. I carried the lantern, though its flame was faint, little more than an ember. The scarf was still tied around my wrist. I could not bring myself to fold it away. It felt like the last fragile string connecting me to her. Claire was gone. I had known that since the first night, but now the truth was carved into me. The mountain had taken her, and it would never give her back. When I reached the village, no one greeted me. Doors remained shut, shutters drawn. The few faces I glimpsed turned away as though I were not meant to be seen. To them, I was no longer a traveler. I was a man carrying the shadow of the Oni on his shoulders. The monk met me once more at the edge of the rice fields. His eyes lingered on my hands, on the lantern, on the scarf. He sighed, not in pity, but in resignation. "You understand now," he said. I nodded, though my throat was too tight for words. "The mountain does not kill," he continued. "It keeps forever." I asked him why. Why such cruelty? Why such hunger? He looked past me toward the peaks hidden in fog. "Not hunger, balance. Mountain take what men forget to respect. You came with love, but love blind. Oni use blind things." His words sank deep, heavier than any chain. I stayed one more night at the inn. The innkeeper left food outside my door but did not enter. I sat on the tatami floor, staring at the lantern. Its flame sputtered low, barely alive. Sleep brought no rest. I saw her again, bound in chains, eyes red, mouth twisted into both a scream and a smile. The Oni's laughter echoed through her voice, mocking, endless. I woke before dawn, trembling. The lantern had gone out. The next morning I boarded the train back toward Tokyo. The villagers did not watch me leave. To them, my story was finished. I was not the first to come searching. I would not be the last. The train windows reflected my face, hollow, pale. For a moment I thought I saw hers beside mine, smiling faintly as if sitting close the way she used to. But when I blinked, the seat was empty. I pressed the scarf to the glass. Outside, the mountains slid past, their peaks hidden in clouds. Somewhere among them, the Oni waited, patient as stone. Weeks later, back in my apartment, life pretended to resume. Work emails, phone calls, the hum of the city, all of it returned. But none of it touched me. At night, I heard her voice in the radiator's hiss, in the subway's echo, in the rain tapping against windows. Sometimes laughter, sometimes sobbing, sometimes just my name. I bought a new lamp for my bedside, but its glow was never steady. Shadows danced in the corners, horns shaping themselves against the wall. Once I awoke to find the scarf hanging from the ceiling, as if tied there by invisible hands, swaying gently, links of chain rattling in its folds. I tried to forget. I told myself it was grief, trauma, exhaustion. But forgetting was impossible. The Oni had judged me, and judgment, once given, cannot be undone. The monk's words haunted me most. Oni clever. It keeps. I understood now what he had meant. Claire was not just lost to the mountain. She had become part of it. And every time I remembered her, every time I whispered her name, the Oni tightened its hold. It did not need to kill me. It only needed to wait. I write this now, not as warning, not as confession, but as inevitability. If you hear of the mountain in Nagano, if you hear of tourists gone missing, You will know what waits in the mist. It is not hunger, it is possession. The mountain keeps its dead, and perhaps soon it will keep me too. Thanks for watching the whole video. Please give me a like and subscribe to the channel to watch more interesting stories.